Slaps and Johnson. Oh, this place erupted. That's what you need. A little bit of flair by the big man.
Here's Mule. Up top, Beckers. Running right in her grill. Gives it to Nika on the right. Oh, a little crossover to the rim. Lays it in.
What a move. That crossover was quick, and she exploded.
Just the fourth time this year that Nova's given up a double-digit run. 10 straight.
Got that feeling!
And now, here's Rob Dibble.
Well, it was a tale of two different games, but same result. UConn comes out on top. Women beat Villanova. And then the men played an epic 2.5-hour game later on last night to beat Providence at Gampel Pavilion. 46 fouls, 46 field goals. And there were 4 technical fouls as well, 1 on each coach, and then there was a pair for a couple of players. But, listen, we had talked about this before the game. The only way, really, that UConn gets beat is when they beat themselves. And it looked early that they were going to get into trouble. They weren't hitting threes, and they weren't hitting foul shots. Then the refs get involved, and they start calling ridiculous ticky-tack fouls on Donovan Clingan. He had 4 fouls in 5 minutes of play. That's 5 minutes combined of Clingan in the game in the first half and into the second half. And it's just, again, they did the same thing to Providence. They backed them against the wall with foul trouble. And so it was – they kept saying it was an ugly game. It's not an ugly game. It's a rivalry game. The Pierre versus Newton talking smack is what makes Big East basketball great. There's a built-in dislike discourse, and that's what makes it so much fun to watch Big East basketball. And if you put the officials in the middle of it, it's going to ruin everything. And that's what I think a lot of that game was about. And we will talk to Adam Giardino coming up next hour about that. But listen, we come out on top of this game with a nice win, but 74-65 could have gone the other way, and Providence didn't even have their best player because he's injured. So thankfully, Providence was terrible at the foul line, 13 for 26, but a lot of those fouls were really bodies going at bodies and aggressiveness and passion for what was in front of those teams. And I think it's been like 20 years since Providence has beaten UConn at Gampel. But that takes away from what Providence is trying to grow there and what UConn is trying to do with being number 1 in the country.
Yeah, I was impressed by Providence last night.
Yeah.
Giving a tip of the cap to them and the fight that they have without their star Bryce Hopkins. I was thinking to myself, man, if Bryce Hopkins is in this game, Providence might win by 10. Devin Carter is all downhill. And Odor is impressive. He knew what he was doing down at the post. He used the opposite glass to get away from Clingan, and he was forcing Clingan to go up on pump fakes and got him in the foul trouble. But like you said, he got in foul trouble as well. And I really do think the refs, I don't know. I don't want to say ruined because I had a great time watching the game. It's just when you have those two particular guys that are very important to what both teams do, and you put them on the bench the entire first half, basically, let's just say that. They don't come back in. When Clingan gets his third with 18 seconds into the second half, that's what set Dan Hurley off. That's why he got his technical. And then Odor was also there with 4 fouls real quick as well. They both come back into the game right around the 9-10 minute mark in the second half with 4 fouls. From there on, it felt like the refs, all of them, did not want to be the guy to call the 5th foul on either of those players. Now, they've already made this bed from the first half. They're living in it now. And with that, I would say Clingan and Odor got away with about 10 or 15 fouls that would have been called if they didn't have their 4th already. And that made it even sloppier in the second half.
Right.
But it is what it is. Stephon Castle showed up big time. Huge threes from him. Big time plays down the stretch. That guy, I think, it was kind of like a coming out party for Stephon Castle last night because he was a big reason we got the win. But free throw shooting, man, is rocky. Not Cam Spencer. That dude was perfect, but everybody else rocky to the point where I'm nervous if we get into a close basketball game in the NCAAs or in the Big East in a big-time profile game, whether it's the tournament or coming up here next against St. John's, that if it's down to a free throw contest, UConn's losing. They are not the best at the line. And like you said, fortunately, neither was Providence last night.
Yeah, and a lot of it, I think, was, not knowing what you could do, how you could do it. I thought that Newton and Pierre was a great matchup, and they were battling all night. Castle, like you said, he really fouled Duro out of the game. I mean, he kept driving just like Carter kept driving, and really there was no answer to either one of them. And they both ended up with 20 points, or maybe Carter had more.
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, so – But I mean, the thing about it was they both shot poorly from three. We were 4 for 23, 17%. They were 4 for 18 from three. So the game was really inside. They took it to us. I liked, Kim English knew that, every time down there, Duro has to go at Klingon. And, again, this is a learning process for Klingon as well. He can't leave his feet.
Right.
And
doesn't need to, by the way. Does not need to.
No, does not need to against a 6'9" guy.
Yeah.
But then Samson Johnson gets in there, and he does the exact same thing. So I think the game plan was great by the Friars. We were coming off 17 made threes. Maybe we were a little overconfident. Maybe it was just the level that Providence brings as far as intensity goes. Two of the best defensive teams in the Big East. That's the bottom line. They both are great defensively, and it's really hard to go anywhere. They disrupt your flow. They disrupted our flow. We disrupted their flow. I felt that our full-court press got to them after a while and wore them down a little bit. But, that's Big East basketball. But to tie a Big East record and match the worst game of the season in the Big East as far as foul calls, it just shows you, officials can change the outcome of a contest. And you started, Pierre fouled out, I think, first. I think then Aduro fouled out. It might have been even Castro fouled out before Aduro. And it really, Providence's bench can't match up with our bench.
Right.
So thankfully, when we could put DR in there and Ball in there, when guys are in trouble, and Klingon's injury allowed Hurley to understand that we could play small ball, and we could go with 5 smaller guys and Caravan at the 5. And even at one point, when Caravan hurt his ankle, we put in Stewart at the 5. And so I just think that we have so many different weapons and capabilities. And when Castle comes out and throws down 20, and a lot of that 20 was when we were trying to crawl back in the game, I thought that was fantastic for Stephon Castle to realize what a difference maker he can be in a game.
Totally. I think a couple of people, too, deserve some honors. One, I was impressed with Corey Floyd Jr., a guy that used to be on UConn, transferred out. It's been a part of Providence's program for 2 years. He came to play. It looked like that guy had something to prove to not only Coach Hurley and that staff, but also that crowd out there. And hats off to them. That place was on fire, totally electric last night. It was long before tip, and I know they stayed on their feet almost the entire way through what you said, longest game in the Big East here in 23-24. But hats off to the crowd last night. I think they're a big reason for some of those misses and poor shooting for Providence. But if you ask Coach Hurley, if you ask Coach Murray, if you ask Kamani Young, Coach Moore, if you ask any of those guys, they were disgusted with what they saw from their team last night. They were not proud of the defense. They were not proud of going for those pump fakes and doing things that are out of character. And they are definitely not proud of 4 for 23 from beyond the arc. This team is so much better than what they showed last night. But I throw it into Big East basketball, to a rivalry, to the hyped-up environment, and it is what it is. Fortunate for UConn to come out on top with a 9-point win. It could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, and it was lopsided in the first half on the offensive boards as Providence was killing us, and then we turned it around in the second half. I thought that was a huge adjustment. Tristan Newton finished with 11 rebounds. Steph Castle had 5, but 3 on the offensive end. But everybody battling. I mean, Klingon came up with a huge ball. Spencer came up with a huge one. A couple of them, we kind of knocked them out of each other's hands, out of bounds. But that was the fight. That's the fight that, UConn has to face sometimes when our bigs get into trouble, into foul trouble. And that's why I think that this is such a deep team, that they didn't get phased. They were down by 8 at one point. And you're down at 8 at your own building and then come out with a 1-point lead by halftime. That just shows, you want to talk about grit? That just shows the grit that these guys were. It was ugly. They were grinding, but they were able to score 29 to the 28 of Providence in the first half. Second half was much better as far as scoring goes, but that first half was one of the worst halves I've seen any two teams play. And a lot of it was because, we'll hear from Adam Giardino, and I'm sure he'll talk about this. The referees set the bad tone. The referees were the ones that kept, almost teeing guys up and warning benches and stuff. And it's like, listen, this is what happens when two good Big East teams get together. They're evenly matched. Let them play. Let's see who the better team is, who can make more threes. Don't decide that at the foul line because obviously, we did make 26 foul shots to their 13. But if that were the other way, we're losing that game.
Yeah, I know we were sloppy. I know they missed free throws. I know they missed threes. But the one thing was the effort's still there. Like, so many people hit the deck last night for loose balls.
Oh, my God. One play, like 4 guys hit the deck.
And Tristan Newton is on the ground like 3 or 4 times. That's such a valuable piece. And I hold my breath. There's the one where he got undercut by Hassan Diarra, and then somehow Ticket Gaines gets the foul called on him, which is like, oh, great. That's perfect. At least it went our way. But Samson Johnson at 7 foot is hitting the floor for loose balls. Like, everybody was all hands on deck, and Providence is coming back. Like, Providence is going to be a problem in this conference regardless if Bryce Hopkins is there or not. Like, this team is really good. I like this coach, Kim English. I think he's got them going in the right direction. Like, they are not going to, call it a rebuilding year. They are still out to try to win this conference, and they're going to be tough for anyone who goes up. I still like Devin Carter and just the way he drives the hole and goes downhill. But like you said, I love our guys. I love how deep we are. Didn't really have to dip into like a lot of minutes for solo ball or a lot of minutes for Jalen Stewart. Hassan Diarra came in and Sampson comes in. Like, that's the big rotation is Sampson and Diarra for a 7-man rotation. But the defense that Diarra brings, like, I know he's the backup point guard basically. He's an extra hand when you're trying to break a press. But that guy in transition D, like, I'll take him as the one on a 2-on-1 any day of the week. That guy is not afraid of stepping in front of someone charging downhill. That guy is not afraid of guarding somebody 5 inches or 50 pounds bigger than he is. I love the toughness of some of these kids. Like, I tell everybody, no one's tougher than Stephon Castle. And he is a baby amongst these men. A baby. And when you see him play, you will not realize that he is the youngest on the court because he plays like a grown man out there. And love for him hitting threes, too. Like, that's a part of his game I don't think a lot of people know, and he hasn't shown it. And maybe he's been tentative to take threes in the past, but when he can get off and he can hit some long-range shots and then you got to press up against him, that's going to be your biggest mistake because he will burn you taking you to the hole. One of the quickest steps on the ball as far as taking a guy one-on-one, especially on that right side. He had some and ones that were beautiful. I just can't say enough about Castle's game last night.
Yeah, and Alex Caravan getting hurt, has to go to the locker room, probably retape his ankle. Comes back immediately. First time he touches the ball, hits a huge three.
Big time.
I mean, hit some clutch foul shots at the end. He was 3 for 3 from the foul line at the end of that game. But again, that's where I talk about the ugliness of the game. It came down to foul shots to win you a ball game instead of guys making big threes or guys making clutch shots. That's not basketball. And, 46 fouls is not a good Big East basketball game. So I just think hopefully these referees, the Big East looks at that and says, hey, listen, these bigs are banging. Let them bang. These guys are going at it on the outside, the guards. That's what guards are supposed to do. As long as he's not hooking him and trying to get by and stuff like that or dropping his shoulder. Like a couple of those early fouls that they called on Providence, they dropped their shoulders and stuff like that. Those are good calls, because, again, they've tried to stop the offense initiating contact to get to the foul line, and I think those were fair. But some of the little ticky-tack ones that they called, even one on Klingon, and then, like you said, there was a couple at the end of the game in the last 2-3 minutes that could have put Klingon on the bench. He did have a clean stuff. There was a couple of other ones that I thought Newton had a clean stuff. They called a foul on him. Yeah. So it's just, you almost like they were looking for fouls instead of just saying, hey, that's good play, and he was still able to make the basket and stuff, and maybe we'll give him an and one. But it was almost like, and then there was one call where I think it was Newton driving to the basket, and he's already in the air. The guy fouls him, and they were questioning whether or not that was a made basket. I mean, they really had an off night, and that's what made it difficult to watch that game.
Speaking of depth, I think things went exactly how I told the masses. If you ran up to Massachusetts to bet that 15.5-point spread for the Uconn women over Villanova, you are welcome. Dibs and I had this point spread at 20.5. It finishes up 81-60. Tried to tell everybody Villanova's going to bring their best effort in the first half. It's going to be close, and then they're going to pull away in the third quarter and then finish them off with a 20-point win. It's almost like we saw the game before we started talking about it yesterday. Women's basketball back to their winning ways, beating down Villanova last night. Leah Edwards with the double-double once again. Or no, it was Nika Mule with the double-double. She had the 10 assists. But Leah Edwards passed Gabby Williams on the all-time scoring list. She's a point away from Swin Cash. It was a good night for her. Paige Beckers, just a ho-hum 21 that she put up against Villanova. Still waiting, Dibs. Still waiting. Where is the competition tour in the Big East for women's basketball? Continues for UConn.
Yeah, and it was a fun watch. I mean, Nika Mule stayed out of foul trouble.
Yeah.
She hit some big threes. She's been clutch from three, and that was huge last night. KK Arnold and Shade not scoring a lot of points, but playing some great defense. But again, on the boards, when you get 7 rebounds out of Edwards, when they were just attacking her, the one girl, let me look up her name. This girl was just Dolce. She was just all over Edwards all night and just, in her face and stuff. And then Olsen was in foul trouble early.
Yeah.
She ended up having 32 minutes played and 15 points. Normally she has around 20 points. But, again, she was on the bench for most of the first half, which is unfortunate for Villanova because they had to try to, fill in with other players that aren't as good as her. But, yeah. I mean, this is a rematch of the Big East Championship last year. Villanova is still one of the best teams in the Big East, but still a good separation between the two.
And the nightmare scenario has begun for you Cowboy fans. Oh, you were cool to lose Dak, keeping him. Cool to lose McCarthy, keeping him. As long as you keep Dan Quinn as defensive coordinator, everything's going to be good. And guess what? Dan Quinn announced today he will be the new head coach of the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, that's like going from the Red Sox to the Yankees. That's an absolute kick in the groin. Listen, Quinn deserves to be a head coach. I wish he would have chose maybe Seattle or somewhere else, but maybe they weren't offered to him. But I think what came out yesterday with Jerry Jones saying he can absolutely work with Bill Belichick, they knew he was leaving, or else they were pushing him out. And that's unfortunate as well. 3 great years with Dan Quinn. In his 3 years, the most takeaways, 94 takeaways on defense, led the NFL over the last 3 seasons. So you're going to see a lot of that hunger on the Commanders' side. Their defense is going to be their strong point, although they traded 2 of their best defenders during the season, which I'm sure Dan Quinn is disgusted with, but they have 5 top 100 picks.
Yep.
They've got the most cap space of anybody in the NFL with $70 million.
Yep.
And so Dan Quinn, he stays in the NFC East. It's going to be a battle to play against the Commanders. I'll root for Dan Quinn, but never the Commanders.
I would be a little nervous because that guy has got, I would say, the blank check to build this team. Like, it's starting from zero right now. You don't have any of the defensive mainstays. It looks like you can pick what quarterback you want coming out. There is some talent still left over, but it looks like it's going to be Dan Quinn's team, and that sounds pretty good to me if I'm a Washington Commanders fan.
Yeah, and there's some great free agent wide receivers that are out there. There's a lot of really solid players that are going to be out there. So, like you said, you could see him bringing in some really, really top-notch players to come in here. I know T. Higgins from the Bengals is a free agent wide receiver. He would be a great addition to the Commanders. So there's going to be a lot of players out there that obviously they're going to go after, and it's going to be fun. I see the Commanders, not rebuilding but reloading, and with Dan Quinn, The biggest problem, I think, is how many Cowboy coaches is he going to take with him? Because he's going to take his linebackers coach, probably his cornerbacks coaches. I mean, he's going to take those guys probably with him to D.C.
Yeah, but I trust him. I think he knows what he's doing.
No, I trust him.
Yeah.
Listen, it's a difference between being a coordinator and being a head coach. You got to delegate authority. You got about 20 coaches underneath you, and you never know about ownership. Hopefully they stay out of his way. And he knew Jerry was bringing in Belichick, and I was listening to Cowherd before we came on, and he was talking about this, and I agree with him 100%. Those two would not coexist comfortably together. Quinn and Belichick would probably be at odds over different things, and Jerry Jones being probably the deciding vote in some things. So I think that was probably the writing on the wall that Dan Quinn said, hey, it's time for me to go. All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll come back. Mike Golick is going to join us next, and we will talk about all of this stuff, including Mike McDonald leaving his Eagles and going to the Seattle Seahawks. It's the Rob Dibble Show with Ben Darnell on your afternoon drive on this Thursday afternoon on Fox Sports Radio.